Hello everybody, this is James Diboe on Discovering Season 5, dedicated to original people as always, and we've got a new guest in today. He's straight from Barbados. He's an artist, a painter. You know, he's got a lot of talents. We're here to speak on some culture of our roots as well. Allow me to introduce Ras Akyem.
Greetings. Good morning.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure anyway. I heard a lot about you anyway. You know, I'm grateful to be introduced by Janice Myers. She's introduced us. And she told me a lot about you. You know, I'm very interested in, you know, anyone who's coming from all over the world. I deal with original peoples as a world traveler anyway. So if you want to tell us a little bit about some of your work. Now, this is a lot of your work inside here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Some of it.
Oh, some of your work, just example, just some of the pictures you've done.
Higher.
A bit higher. Yeah, actually. Put it a bit higher anyway. There we go. So, we all see that? Yeah. So, we've got plenty of these anyway. So, where did it begin anyway? Let's deal with the timeline on this. Where did you first start? How old was you when you first became an artist?
Oh, I was about 3 or 4 years old. I was no, not when I started drawing.
Yeah.
Right. From very early in my life, I was introduced. I had access to you know, materials, and like any child, I like to make marks. Children often make marks. That's you know, you give a child a pencil and he starts to scratch and do things, right? And pretty early, I recognized that I had a facility and a passion for this thing. We didn't have a library at our house, you know, because we lived in I was born into Barbados, you know, into a post-colonial environment, right? And which says that you didn't have access to a lot of stuff, you know. And so at school, at home first, you know, looking at stuff in the newspaper, I realized that I was attracted to images, right? And I also, in hindsight, discovered that I was dyslexic, even though at that time, the idea of dyslexia wasn't even on the map, you know. It's only becoming aware of that in this time, and I look back at the challenges I had as a child, I realized that, yes, I had this challenge, you know, and that my facility for communication was really through images, more so than verbal, right? But I also had a passion for words, you know. So I very early figured out how to create a way of retaining ideas and information, you know, because my brain was wired differently, you know. So I couldn't the patterns that were established that everyone generally worked through didn't work for me. I had to find a parallel way, a parallel path. And so it was through the visual expression that I found my strength. And then, because I had a love for words, even though I was challenged, it became something that I had to overcome. So I kind of developed techniques and structures, personal techniques and structures, you know, like making interconnections between things, you know. To remember a word or something, I would connect it to something that was visual, right? So that's how I began to learn how to articulate ideas, right? And then at 9 years old, my uncle took me and joined me in the library, the Barbados Public Library, because he recognized that I had a love for books and stuff. We couldn't afford them. You know, I would try to read the paper from back to back because I loved information too. I was curious, right? And so I joined the library at 9 years old, the Barbados Public Library. And my first books were art books because I really loved art. So I went into the art section and I borrowed 3 books I remembered. 2 of them were on painters, one on the Renaissance, one on Picasso, right? For the first time, I'm seeing the someone who's responding to reality by deconstruction, which was the work of Picasso. At the time, I didn't know that he was highly influenced by African sculpture because I didn't have an exposure to that at the time, right? But I was so fascinated. I felt something about this work You know, there's this kinetic relationship. And I kept that book under my pillow until I was like 17 years old. You know, I used to get up every day and just look at this work. And like through a process of osmosis, more or less, you know, I sort of became Picasso. You know, I mean, the essence of his creative process. I think I say in the I had a kind of silent knowledge in terms of understanding that process. So I would secretly work, you know, and try to do this. It was that book was like religion for me, you know. And after a few years, I figured out how he did it. At least I thought I did, right? How he did it. And it gave me a confidence and a boldness, you know. And I started to just work at that. And also in school, because I had a sort of an organic facility for the creative process. You know, I had this muscle memory in my hand that when I make certain marks, I had the ability to do that over and over again. I could record very easily. And I knew this because people said it. You know, I would be drawing pretty innocently, and people would say, "You're good. You know, you're amazing." At school, all my friends would ask me to draw for them. In biology classes, I would do all the diagrams for my fellow students. I would work with they would give you in art class. They give you something called plastiline. It's a kind of clay that had oils in it to make it more pliable and malleable. And I would you know, pilfer some and take home and make stuff with it. When the rain fell and we didn't have access to materials, we would go into the yard and we would take mud, you know, the wet mud, and make stuff. Yeah. At the sea, we make sand castles on the beach. And so art was ever a part of my life.
You know, when you said before, did you say you suffer from dyslexia?
Yes.
But you didn't know what it was back then?
No. It's only in hindsight I realized that's what was happening to me.
So
because my son, my second son, had this challenge, and then that's when I had to deal with it.
Because see, being an artist, I mean, being a writer, if you got dyslexia, you know, you're going to have a bit of trouble, aren't you? Now, an artist with dyslexia, see, I've never really compared anything like that. So does that make a difference, or does that, would you say dyslexia?
I think it actually helped because
it did help, yeah, because more of an imagination, would you say? Right,
exactly.
I get it, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because, you see, our art doesn't necessarily have to be predicated on a linear narrative, you know?
Yeah.
Right? It is visionary. It is conceptual, right? So you can create parallel realities, you know? So, and that's the thing about it. It is the space of the imagination, you know? And that world, that parallel world was always very interesting to me. You know, so I lived between two spaces, and that was facilitated by my dyslexia, really. Yeah. You know, because both were real.
Do you have a business? Is this your business anyway? What you do?
Yeah, that's all I do. That's my profession. Yeah. I write too.
You write also?
Yeah. I actually was a teacher.
Okay. What?
You know, because I won 2 scholarships. After I left school, I wanted to be an architect. I loved architecture, yeah. Because form was always important to me.
Definitely.
You know, right? And architecture, I gravitated towards that pretty easily because design was very strong, you know.
Yeah, because it's so basically the images become more stronger.
Yeah, I'm very image based.
Yeah, yeah. But
right? that's I have an indelible
visual. You're very visual.
Yeah, I'm visually oriented.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, but over the years, I've also learned how to engage other faculties, you know, and especially, and so all my sensory faculties became alive and awakened through the creative process, you know. And then I discovered I had a talent for words because I spent a lot of time. Because of my dyslexia again, you know, that was a deficit for me, right? And so I spent a lot of time focusing on, you know, reading, you know, looking at you know, how words function, you know.
So having dyslexia, you know, I've met a few people who've got dyslexia. Would you say that like was, you know, because you like to read, you're saying, so with having dyslexia, did you feel like it's holding you back? trying to read
because
what you
because
love.
when I there was a time early in my life when I look at stuff, written stuff, sometimes I'm actually, I start to read stuff, but something happens on the page. You know, you start to see letters differently. Sometimes you see them backwards.
Yeah.
And right, I don't know if people understand that. It's a very serious challenge.
Yeah.
You know, and people think that probably you're stupid.
Well,
You know, because
you know, you're going to get people. I mean, it's just like going to school. I mean, there was some people who had dyslexia, and you know, some people like they assume that you've got no clue about nothing. But
Exactly.
but then I've seen a lot of talented ways and talented, you know, imaginations and just take. I don't know. It's like senses, like a man who's blind. He might be blind, but he has these super
right,
senses in other
your
ways.
other sensory,
Yeah.
your other sensory organs
Your other
are
senses.
amplified.
That's right.
You know.
Yeah.
And that happened to me too, but I was very determined because I knew that a lot of our history were in books,
Yeah.
right? And I saw I saw something that even made me more determined. That it said, if you want to hide something from black people, you put it in a book, because black people don't read. Right?
Well, that's it. But
you know,
that's more interesting you say that. I mean, I read a lot. You know what I mean? Because I realised how important it was to know our history. And as far as like you know, I've got African one side and I've got Caribbean the other side. Now on the Caribbean, we don't know exactly where we come from in Africa, but obviously with the African I do. So I've kind of like had a balance where I've realised that, well, slave trade is only 400 years, and it's the most brutal atrocities we've gone through in any episode
it's a
of
Holocaust.
But it's a tiny timeline of humanity, of how
is
long we
true.
go back.
That is true.
And I'm talking about civilization right through.
Yeah.
All parts of Africa had civilizations, which they don't want to tell you about. And this is why we've got to write our own books.
Necessarily.
Because we can read their books and they'll tell us about we were just slaves and everything negative, nothing positive about us. But at the same time, you know, they can do that for people they've stole the history of. They've give you the slave name. So, you know, whatever the surnames of most Caribbean people, they took it from the slave master, you know. So it's how far you go. For me, I would just want to go really deep. Started traveling around Africa, traveling around different places around the world. It's all about the first peoples with first teachings. And I find everywhere to go, when I deal with the oldest teachings, they all believe in one supreme being. If you want to use the word God, Allah, whatever word you want to use, it's all the same thing to me. You know, a supreme being. So, with yourself, are you Rasta? I'm only asking because you're the dreads.
Yes.
Rasta.
But there's something about the evolution of the philosophy, because
Yeah,
yes,
definitely.
right. Because if you talk to the older traditional Rastafarians,
Yeah.
they're very much steeped in the biblical, you know, the whole religious tradition and stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The younger generation of Rastafaris, though,
Yeah.
right? They regard Rastafari as a revolutionary black theology.
From a Pan-African perspective?
Yes, as opposed to that a religious extension of the biblical teachings of the Jews.
Okay, so
Right.
which part because I was told that there's 3 different sects of Rastafarian. Well, when I say 3 sects,
there's so many different sects now, and
there's
they're
more now.
right? And the thing is about the mystery and the power of the dreadlock has been dissipated and you know and watered down, you know, through the fashion industry, you know. So dreadlocks no longer become a symbol of African heritage and power, right? It's become, you know, just flagrant,
A trend.
trendy, you know.
Yeah.
So they try to nullify, you know, the essential meaning and purpose of that, because these are really antennas.
I've said this one before.
Yeah.
Antennas.
Right?
Definitely.
Right. And because your body's electrical,
Yeah.
right? And this is where you connect to your universe.
The spiral.
Yes, please.
Oh, I've done all that research into that.
Right.
And we can go deep on that.
Right.
Obviously, it's these kind of conversations when we talk about the spiral, we could sit there for hours, talk about these things, because these are not topics that, these are just scratching the surface when we mention these things. I mean, how deep that really goes, what we're talking about, you know, antennas, you know.
So, right. So the younger generation of Rastafari no longer look for some spirit god that lives in the sky.
Oh, that, yeah, sky
Right?
god.
We don't do sky god.
Oh,
right?
that's all foolish.
And right.
Yeah.
And we don't look to our oppressors for our salvation. You know, we regard godhood as the highest aspect of a man.
The
right?
highest.
So when you ascend, right, to your highest consciousness, you manifest godhood.
Definitely. It's an example with the Yoruba. There's something called Ori. Well, not the god.
I know
The god's Oludamara.
I know that tradition.
Yeah. But when you say Ori,
yes.
I'm concentrating on Ori, just one of the aspects,
Yes.
because you got Shango, Ogun.
Right.
But just looking at Ori, what you've just said then, connecting to the higher self, that's like
the Ori is the crown.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, so it's interesting. I'm happy you've done the research into these areas.
But they live this.
Because we get taught this is spookism. It's bad. It's negative African spirituality. This is what we've been fed to take on the oppressor's God.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I'm pleased that you're true Pan-African, I can see.
Yeah, we're closing
you know?
that circle, man, because
Definitely.
we're tired of the oppressive information that we get.
Yeah.
Right, and the misinformation and that's all part of the conditioning, and it's a problem we have everywhere where Black people live.
Everywhere.
Right? Because the conditioning has been so almost complete, you know.
Yeah.
And that we have no notion of who we were, you know.
It's
the
been
people that I regard highly are the Moors. The Moors are still very much centered.
Oh, we speak on the Moors the other day.
Yeah, and the Moors are fascinating peoples, you know.
Yeah. And this is a missing link, you see.
Yeah.
When I was listening to Dr. Ben Yoshi Ben Yakinen,
Oh, you know Ben.
Dr. Ben, always. I know the grandmasters. This is why I can bring this information.
Okay.
I've had to.
Let's talk.
So with Dr. Ben Yoshi Ben Yakinen, yeah, he said that he didn't understand African history properly because there was a missing link. The missing link was the Moors. So in between the transatlantic, so you got the transatlantic slave trade here, then you've got ancient African history, but there's this gap of the Moors, and this filters the connection. This is the connection with Africa and Europe, communicating for years, bringing in civilization, brought in everything. And I said, I don't even look at the Moors going as a conquest. I was saying it was like a Christmas quest for what they did to them. You know, using the Dark Ages, and we brought you out of that.
Exactly, because
I mean,
Europe is Spain is about to. The Europeans had this concept that the world is flat, and if you travel, you're going to fall over the edge of the horizon.
Yeah.
Right, which is an illusional thing because the horizon don't really exist in actuality. You know, it's about perspective. It's where you are.
Even navigators.
Right, exactly. But the Africans, when Columbus had the ideas, he pretended they were his ideas, right? But he was hanging out with Africans.
That's right.
Right? He was hanging out with the Africans, and they told him that, you know, because they have been traveling for generations. The Africans have been in the Caribbean before Columbus.
The Olmecs.
Because they found
they
found African implements, masks,
skeletal remains as well,
and vessels and stuff of clay and stuff.
Clay vessels
in the
around
Caribbean,
the wrist.
In the Caribbean, right? And they want to know because the Africans had been there, but they didn't stay.
Okay.
Right? Because of the hurricanes. Right?
Yeah.
Because every year there are hurricanes that devastate the Caribbean. Every September.
Brutal.
Right? There's hurricane season. There's August, September, October. Is dangerous in the Caribbean. Right? And the Africans understood the weather patterns. Obviously, because they used sails to travel. They didn't have engines.
But they knew about the monsoon winds.
Exactly. They understood the whole thing. Right?
Yeah.
So they travel on the currents. Right? Because the currents come from Cape Verde.
Yep.
And they come right, and they lead right. That's where the hurricanes begin too, and they come right down to the Caribbean.
Yep.
Right. They follow the transatlantic trade winds. Right. The same thing that the slavers did, but they learned that from the African navigators. Right.
Yep.
The Pizon brothers. Right. Who used to deal with the African. They were from Portugal, and they taught Columbus how to navigate, because he wanted to know how they could know this. And they told him, we live in the desert. A desert is an ocean of sand. If you can navigate a desert, you can navigate an ocean.
Henry the Navigator.
Using the cosmos.
Yep.
They read the constellations of the stars and did it, right? So they're the ones who convinced Columbus that it can be done. But he was an idiot. He was lost. They were trying to find a route to India. They were about capital. They were capitalists. Right? They were about getting more gold, they wanted to take the assets that were available in the New World, right? So they decided, because they were in battles with England and the Dutch and the Europeans were going through civil wars. When Europe fights Europe, all of a sudden it's a world war, as though Europe is the world. No, that's a civil war, because you have people of the said ethnic group fighting each other on the same land mass. Yeah. Right? So that's a civil war. That's not a world war. Yeah. Right? So what happened with them was that they want to get to India. Right? Ferdinand and his wife wanted to get to India in order to get the wealth that they knew that they heard that was there. So they want to find a shortcut to get to India before the rest of Europe, because everybody was trying to, everybody was, colonizing and robbing and stealing, and so they tried. Columbus got lost on his journey and ended up in the Caribbean, and he thought he was in India, so he called it the West Indies. Right, which is a real joke, because he was nowhere near India.
There's another version of that, though, what you're saying. Here's an interesting one. According to Dr. John Hendrik Clark, another friend of Dr. Ben.
Too, yes.
He believes that they knew where they were going.
He has Bajan roots, actually.
Yeah, he believed anyway that they knew where they were going to America. Supposedly, he double-crossed Isabella.
You mean to America?
Yeah.
Yeah, but he got lost going to India.
I mean, I'm talking about from 1492.
Yes, that's when he sailed out.
Because supposedly that was the lie to Isabella. So she could give them permission to be able to cross to America. But she's supposed to have got double crossed, according to Dr. John Hendrik Clark. But obviously the version you said, that's the version we all heard about. They were going to India and they happened to go, because supposedly these Moorish navigators took them there.
Yes.
So this is why, I knew the Moors knew the seas. They knew the seas
very well.
So this is a possibility I looked at. Well, maybe he don't know where he's going, but he knows no he's being taken somewhere.
Yes,
that's a better way of putting it.
He was being guided. Right.
So whether he thought he was going this place, but the Moors were taking them to America, which we spoke on. But anyway, yes. So back to Barbados. Anyway, do you have any of the indigenous people left there? We have the Caribs, the Arawaks.
The indigenous Caribs and Arawaks, they live in St. Vincent.
St. Vincent.
St. Lucia.
St. Lucia.
Yeah. And
Dominica.
Dominica, especially Dominica.
Dominica.
That's the seat.
Yeah.
Dominica has a river for every year, every day in the year.
Wow.
They have over 365 rivers.
Interesting.
It's green completely green. It's the most lush environment you would ever find.
Yeah. Wow. I was young when I was in Barbados. I was too young. But beautiful place, though. Yes. I love all them Caribbean islands. Yes. So, do you travel yourself?
I've traveled a bit.
Yeah.
Pretty extensive.
Oh, great. I love that, traveling. Where's some of the places you go?
Through my art, my art took me to quite a few places. I've been all over North America. I've been over here.
Yeah.
Right. I've been throughout the Caribbean and South Africa.
Yeah.
Right. And quite a lot of places, man. It'd be moving. You know,
it's just a blessing to travel. You know, it broadens the mind up. You know, so that's what it's about. Yeah. So, what would you find South Africa? Because that's the reason why I brought it. That because even though it's Africa, you know, it's a funny type of Africa.
Yes, it's very strange. You know, one of the things about South Africa I found is like, again, you know, the younger generation is very different than the older people. There were a lot of apologetic Negroes there, man. I mean, like, you try to talk about, you know, the history and you know, they don't want to deal with that.
Really damaged, though. You know, I mean, you have the coloureds, then you have blacks.
They're broken.
There's all these different castes, isn't it?
You know, and the white folks did a real job on us, man.
Big job.
You know.
And this is the chains on
really
the brain still.
I went into Soweto, man. I stood in the middle of Soweto and the water just ran down my eyes. You know,
yeah. I mean, I went through a period of time when I was growing up. I used to be an angry person sometimes where I'm thinking like, well, you know, all this, what we've been through. Then when I went to Gambia about 2014, I remember I went to the Kunta Kinte Island. From that time, that's when I realised I'm not interested in the slave trade. When I say not interested, I'm aware of it. I've studied it.
But you don't want to be stuck there.
I don't want to be stuck there because the effect of it, even though we free from these chains now, the shackles are still on the mind.
But I'll tell you something, though.
Yeah.
I don't think we can just walk away.
You can't forget about it because the damage is hard.
There's so many scars. But because the psyche of the African in the diasporic space right now is still very fractured. It's still very
colonialism's a big
process
thing.
Of healing. Yeah, because colonialism is an ongoing process.
Ongoing.
You know, it just changes. They just change methodologies.
Yeah.
Right. And but they're still very much about control. You know. Yeah. They still want to be the ruler in the house of the rising sun, according to Bob Marley. You know.
I think it's one of those things, though. Just like you were talking about the antennas before and connecting to the universe. Because their rule is going to be, it's not going to last forever, the rule. And they wasn't ruling from the beginning. You know, it was the original people. We were everywhere around this planet. So, you know, just like cycles, we knew about cycles and many different cycles. And, you know, you see when the Yoruba paint themselves white, and you see the Aboriginal paint themselves white, imitating ghost. Because they see white represents death. And you notice when black people entered this country, they flipped it and said black represents death. Right. So everything that we said or did, they'll make it negative. We can bring spirituality. They'll take it, make a religion or some sort of thing out of it and throw it back to us. We take it on and then we're stuck. You know, back to what you were saying before about the savior. You know, are we going to get out of it? If
I avoid religion because it was so complicit in the process, right, of indoctrinating us and keeping us fixed in that subservient state, right? I think it's time to get up off our knees.
That's because
right. When you kneel down to prayer, you still have to get up and manifest it.
True.
You know.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't understand the purpose of this, you know, spending all this time praying. You get up in the morning, you kneel down, you pray to this entity or something like that. And then you, the individual, have to get up and manifest this thing that you're asking this entity to provide. And then you give this entity the glory for something that you actually realize yourself.
Lost touch with nature a lot, though. You know, when we were talking about prayer, you know, if you could get people chopping down a tree, and they give thanks to it. You know, speak to the tree.
Prayer is action, man.
Yeah, speak. You know, well, that's it. And you plant another tree. That's what you're supposed to do, isn't it? You know, so.
But this illusion that these people have, you know, where you close your eyes and you know, because when you're kneeling down praying, your eyes closed. That's when they took our gold and all our assets, you know.
So you open that eyes.
Yeah, when you open your eyes, everything is gone, man. You know, like.
Yeah.
You know.
No, definitely it is. You know. But it's good. So in Barbados, yeah, because I'm always looking at...
Well, Barbados is very centered in
I was going to say,
regarded
Pan-African movement. Do you have any Pan-African movements?
Yes, but it's peripheral because central to Barbados was the crown in the Europe in England's the jewel in England's crown, right? They regarded us as their most important asset. Barbados is known as Little England. There are people in Barbados who are more English than the English.
Well, they believe that they're doing a good job when they do that, but
more slaves came to Barbados than to the entire continent of America, of North America. Can't you believe it? It was the place where you train, and you know, if you're a bad slave in Jamaica, they send you to Barbados. You become they say you are Barbadosed. You know, it was a verb. You understand?
Yeah.
Right? You know, and when you come to, even up to this day, when people come to Barbados and it begin to behave like the traditional Barbadians, they say you have been Barbadianized, which means that you have become docile. You've lost your fire. You've become very subservient and obedient, right? And so it was the place where many slaves in the Caribbean were broken because it was so small. It's 166 square miles, 21 miles long, 14 miles wide. There are no mountains. There are no jungles. You understand? So it's a place where you could not really escape. So what you have is a personality that turned inward. You understand?
Yeah.
Right? So you have an introverted personality.
Okay.
Right? That cannot speak its truth for fear of being punished, demonized. You understand? Because it had consequences. Right, and that became a generational trait until pretty recent in our history. You know, I mean, they were always rebellious blacks. You know, but they were, you know, punished brutally as an example for the others. You know, they would leave bodies hanging.
How did I was speaking to someone the other day about in Jamaica. They one time wanted to ban dreadlocks, or not the fact he wanted to ban it. It was looked down upon by Jamaican people in itself.
Dreadlocks?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you see, but that's again a result of the indoctrination of the whole Christian tradition.
Is Barbados similar?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I remember when Rastafari first manifested in Barbados, which was in the 70s, right? The police, who we regard as the former slave catchers, because the police force has replaced the tradition of the slave catchers. You know, the way the plantations had a band of slave hunters. They would go out and capture runaway slaves, right? So in the post-colonial environment now, when societies became structured, they have the police force that played that said role, that anytime you get out of line, jail.
That's
right. Right. So it's very similar. And the problem I have now that we have become a Republican state is that we have not changed any of those colonial laws. Really, right? So I don't know how you can become a Republican state, but you're still functioning through the laws that were created by slavers.
Exactly.
You know, it's a serious problem.
No win.
So a lot of the Caribbean nations are... There are a lot of conflicts in our idea of nationhood, right? Because we still have a lot of obligations to the colonial heads. We still pay a lot of obeisance to the royal house. You know, there are royalists in Barbados still. Even when we were going for independence, it was brutally fought against. You know, it was like...
This is why Pan-Africanism is so important.
Very important.
Wherever we are, home, abroad... Marcus Garvey philosophy.
Exactly.
You know, totally ahead of its time.
That's what influenced Rastafari in the Caribbean, right? My first influences in Rastafari was by reading the opinion and philosophies of Marcus Garvey. Yeah. Right? And every Rastafari in Barbados has probably read the philosophy and opinions of Marcus Garvey. Yeah. You know, that was a seminal...
You have to read that, man.
Seminal, you know. And because... for enlightenment, for self-enlightenment and awareness, you know, this was the catalyst. Yeah. This is the match that really lit, you know, the fires of consciousness in us as youngsters, you know. Yeah. And then, fortunately for me too, in my district where I live, in my parish, there was a young radical guy called Elambe Motley, who had studied in North America. So he was there during the times of the Black uprising in America, the Black Renaissance.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And he was at university during those years. So he returned to Barbados in the 60s, the late 60s and early 70s. And he built, and his parents were involved. His grandfather was actually the mayor of Bridgetown. So he was already, his family was into politics and stuff. And they were the ones who inherited the reins of political power when the British actually left, right? So he studied in North America. He returned home as a radical because he was, he knew about, the whole Malcolm X and all that, and the revolution that was started in America, in Harlem, right?
Yeah.
So he came and he set up a place pretty near to where he lived called Yoruba House, where he taught young people to study African literature. He had a library there, drums. There was drumming. He brought in Africans to teach us drumming, to play the drums, to build drums, to make drums, right? He had a theater, a performance community that we were going to the community and perform, do plays and stuff that were written by Black playwrights, and plays that dealt with our history and our culture, and that was one of my early beginnings in terms of an awakening of the consciousness.
Now,
right?
Do you have any, to help promote your business, your social medias?
I'm on Facebook, Akyem Ramsey.
Akyem Ramsey.
Yes.
Okay, Akyem Ramsey on Facebook.
AKYEM-A.
Yep.
Right, Ramsey, Ramsey.
Yeah.
Right, and you can find me on Facebook, on Instagram.
Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah.
Okay, because it's very important that people know how to reach you.
Or you can Google me too, because you can see a lot of information about me on Google too.
Yeah. It's important that people can reach out. So what's your plans while you're in Liverpool anyway? How long are you here for?
Well, I'm presently about to do some research for a project that I'm going to complete in Scotland.
Oh, you're going to Scotland to do it? Yeah. Okay.
With TWR, the World Reimagined.
Oh, okay.
James works with.
Yeah,
right.
The World Reimagined.
They were in Barbados because the husband of the director of the project that I'm presently working with, she is of Barbadian heritage, Ashley Adje. She's married to a Ghanaian architect, a very well-established and renowned young architect who built the Museum of African art, African and American art in Washington. It was recently opened, maybe a couple of years ago, during the tenure of Obama.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a brand. You didn't see that museum?
No.
It's dedicated to Black culture and Black art.
Oh, amazing.
It's strictly Black.
Yes.
Musicians, anything to do with Black culture and creativity is in that museum.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah, everything.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And it's interactive.
Yeah, we need more of that everywhere.
Museum.
These are things we need.
And the design is incredible because it is based on African traditional structures. It is not like the European architectural stuff. This guy has a very peculiar vision, a very unique vision. And our Prime Minister, which is the first female Prime Minister too, our first female Prime Minister, Mia Motley.
Yeah.
Right? She invited him to come and build a shrine on a slave plantation in Barbados that has the greatest retention of deceased Africans. It has a burial ground.
Yeah.
Right? An authentic African burial ground.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a shaman buried there, an African shaman, with all his implements and his regalia, the whole thing.
Yeah.
But when they discovered it and they took it up, I think they brought all that stuff to London. To England. Because a lot of our history are in archives in England.
That's right. All over the place.
Yeah, so we have to come here in order to access it. You know? Right? And that's why I'm going to the Museum of Slavery, because a lot of the information is there too, in their vaults and there. you know, in their archives.
Got to dig into there,
And
yeah.
we got to uncover that.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, you know what, Raz, I want to thank you very much for today. You know, I really appreciate, you know, I've learned a lot of you. And I always like to get people on from wherever we are,
Right.
home, abroad,
Yeah.
just following the Marcus Garvey philosophy and spirituality. So I want to thank you very much, Raz.
I appreciate it.
All right, this is James
Bless
Diboe on Discovering Season 5, dedicated to original peoples, and we are here. And peace, Raz.
Shout
Thank you
out to
very
all
much.
the Africans in England.
Pan-African
Bless up.
will
Wonderful.
live and fulfill.
Yeah,
Bless.
majesty.